Welcome to Genesis Unleashed, where we unleash the truth of Genesis.
And ask the question, if evolution is primarily a religious idea, why is it taught in science classes? Welcome to Genesis Unleashed. We are on question 15 of the 15 questions for Evolutionist flyer.
This is it.
The last question. This is it, yeah. The question reads this way. Why is a fundamentally religious idea a dogmatic belief system that fails to explain the evidence taught in science classes? And the detail on the question is, Karl Popper, famous philosopher of science, said, Darwinism is not a testable scientific theory, but a metaphysical, in other words religious, research program. Michael Ruse, evolutionist science philosopher, admitted evolution is a religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and it is true of evolution still today. If you, quote, you can't teach religion in science classes, then why is evolution taught? That's the question.
If evolutionists themselves are admitting that it's a religion and has religious aspects, why is it in science class?
Right, and we introduced this in the last question, question 14. For more details on this, again, it's the same article we referenced last time. It's Not Science, and you can look at that, creation.com/notscience. And there's another good article also referenced in the flyer there, the religious nature of evolution. And you can access that by going to creation.com/evo-religious, evolution-religious.
I mean, creation and evolution, they're actually very, very similar in many ways.
They are.
Now, people say, well, what are you talking about? But just follow me here. I mean, the usual notion is that evolution is science and creation is religion.
Right. Yeah,
and there's all these books written by theists, non-theists, whatever, talking about the relationship between faith and science and religion and science and all these types of things. But really, there are many, many similarities, and it's the differences that are usually highlighted, right? That's what they want to say. Well,
yes.
The faith versus observational science, and these at the extreme ends of the argument.
Science is about this,
That's
and
right.
faith is about this, and gee, how can we get them to talk to each other? And
right. Very interesting.
Loads of books.
I mean, when you think of Kepler or Newton or Faraday or Pascal, or they didn't seem to have a problem. They didn't seem to need loads of theologians and atheists or whatever, and people in between, writing books so that they could understand how they could believe in the creator God of the universe and also do operational science. So it's interesting that we're in this conundrum today.
And we can look at some of those similarities. Here are some of the similarities between creation and evolution. Number one, they're both stories about the past and processes, or stories about past events and processes that no one alive today has observed.
Right.
That's the same for both of them.
Yep.
Both of them involve investigating how the universe operates today. That's operational science.
Right.
Both creation and evolution involve looking at how things work today.
Right. And then supposing how that came to be.
Yes, yes. Number three, they both attempt to explain how everything we observe originated within the story, within the number one, the story about the past.
Right.
So evolution seeks to, it's historical science, right?
Yep.
Evolution seeks to look at things today, how they work, and then try and figure out their origin by fitting them into the story about the past that they hold to by faith.
Right, and you'll often see that in books, right? This creature lived 70 million years ago, and we know they did this, and we know they did that, and it's stated as if somebody went out and took a time machine, zipped back in time, observed it, and came back and is telling us about it.
Yeah, but to be honest, I mean, we do the same thing.
Of course.
Right? From a different perspective.
Yeah.
We've got the Bible, our creation is based on the Bible there, obviously. It's a different history.
Yep.
And so we look at that same data.
That's right.
Well, we know that this happened, and we make the same statements as evolution.
And
they're very similar.
Here are the differences, of course, because there are differences. Number one, just like you said, creation is based on the Bible. That's what we believe.
Right.
Evolution is based on imagination. See, it's interesting
Ouch.
because, because they can ouch all they want because, I mean, the Bible is a historical book. You can check out geography, you can check out archaeology, you can check out other history books. I mean, there's something there that you can try to verify using different things. Evolution, that's based, I mean, every time you see a drawing of some so-called creature that turned from a lizard into a bird and it's halfway in between, that's just some drawing from somebody's imagination.
Right. So they don't have, the differences are they don't have a written record the way that Christians do.
You make it up as you go along.
Yeah. So it might sound harsh to say it comes from imagination, but
let's be honest here. Yep.
Right.
And now creation allows both natural and supernatural explanations for the origin of the universe. Okay. Evolution censors any conclusions involving supernaturalism. So really, when people are talking about being open-minded, I mean, unless you know everything, which means you're God, when you're going to study things or when you're going to ponder things, if you just automatically exclude things because they don't fit your worldview, that's not being very open-minded.
Right.
So actually the creationist says, okay, well, God he created some natural laws, or the way he normally upholds the universe, which are going to, that's where we get uniform, mechanisms and
right.
processes and stuff. But God can intervene in his creation anytime he wants. He's God, right? But the evolutionist says, no. Well, atheist evolutionists anyway, no.
Right, yeah.
Supernatural is excluded by fiat, basically, just by saying it's so.
Yeah. So within the 6 days of creation, there were both natural things happening. I mean, God creates light, and the light behaves according to natural laws that God has, of course,
we now
put in place.
call natural laws.
But,
yes.
Yes. But, so there's both natural and supernatural. So there's
once God puts them in place supernaturally, then they seem to operate on a uniform manner. I mean, Dr. Scott Todd, he's an immunologist at Kansas State University. He said this. He was very honest. Even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such an hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not naturalistic.
That's an amazing admission, I thought.
It is. It's absolutely amazing.
So even if all the data points to if it's going down the road that's going to end up at the conclusion that there's an intelligent designer behind everything that we see, we're not going to go down that road. We're just going to ignore all the data and go down a different road, naturalism.
Can you imagine a court case? I mean, we use this court case analogy that Dawkins talked about in the question number 14, right?
Yeah.
So you might want to review that. But Dawkins says it's like a court case, where nobody saw it happen. He's talking about evolution, but all the evidence points one way. Can you imagine going into a courtroom and there's two parties, right? One's saying, well, this person died by natural causes. The other party's saying, no, somebody caused it to happen. Now, if all the data pointed to somebody causing it to happen, but somebody just declared, no, we don't accept that. We're just going to go with it all happened naturally.
Yeah, he fell on a knife 19 times.
Yes. Just there was an earthquake and his body just kept bouncing up in the air and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yet this is a kind of methodological naturalism, it's called. We're just going to, everything's just natural. Doesn't matter what the evidence points to. That's just not logical.
It's a form of self-censorship.
Yep.
Of course, the evolutionists will disagree with that, but that's really what's going on.
Right.
You censor out supernatural things.
Yep.
They're both stories. Both creation and evolution are stories about the past held to by faith.
Yep.
Each one involves science. As we said, it involves looking around and seeing how things operate today.
Right.
And then, but regardless, each one is fundamentally religious. It's a belief that you have about the past. As Christians, we believe that the Bible's history is true, that it actually is God's Word,
That's right.
and it's true from cover to cover, and that's the belief that by faith we have. The evolutionist has a faith belief in the history that essentially has been made up by people.
Yep. So in reality, evolution is a deduction from a faith position. It can't be proven by science because it's supposedly something that happened billions of years ago. If non-living chemicals somehow came together and formed some kind of life form. And this concept that matter is all there is, that there's no supernatural, that's just a deduction you've made or whatever.
It's a belief.
It's a belief system.
So why is it taught in science classes? That's the question.
Exactly.
We did get some answers to this as we did with the previous 14 questions.
Yep.
Answer number 1. Evolution can explain the evidence. Creationists such as CMI simply refuse to recognize this.
It's just not true. We understand that evolutionists can explain the evidence.
Of course.
Right? What we're saying is that explanation does not hold up in most cases. Sometimes I've seen an evolutionary explanation and I say, yeah, that would make sense. I mean, if natural selection and genetic mutation, if genetic mutation is actually causing new forms and functions and features and creatures that we've never seen before, of course natural selection is going to select for that. Of course they have a way to explain the evidence. We're not denying that. We're just saying that we don't accept their explanations of the evidence.
The question that needs to be asked is the evolutionary understanding of the evolutionary interpretation of the observations the only possible way that the data can be understood?
Yep.
Of course the answer is no.
That's
there
right.
could be dozens of different ways.
That's right.
And in many cases, it's not even the best way. Evolutionists attempt to explain observations within their version of history.
Right.
And it's the same thing we do.
Same thing we do.
By the way.
Yep.
And that history, of course, well, the world's billions of years old, everyone knows this, and it goes back through biological evolution. Life initially came from non-living chemicals, and then you go back to the Big Bang.
That's right.
And so even if there is a God, that God didn't have anything to do with origins, so we're not going to allow any supernatural explanations. It's naturalism. That's the only thing we're going to accept.
Many evolutionists are convinced that evolution equals science. Now we've made this distinction before between empirical science and historical science, so that this line gets blurred, and they think, well, science, it's stuff that we observe and we touch and we feel. But that's not what evolution is. That's a belief about the past, an interpretation of evidences. So they get so convinced that evolution is science that they think that creationists have rejected science. We see that in people's blogs. We see people writing into our ministry.
Well, it's wrapped up in this question as well.
Of course.
CMI, the Creation Ministries International, that's our group.
Yeah.
We reject science.
Right. It's interesting that we have a bunch of PhD staff. We have more PhD staff on board with Creation Ministries than any other Christian ministry we're aware of. So obviously we accept science. It's the evolutionists' history, their interpretation of the facts that we don't agree with.
Right, because we don't accept that history.
That's right. So we want to make sure people aren't equivocating here between historical and operational science. It's very important.
Right. And thinking about the observations, there isn't a single scientific observation that we disagree with.
You mean a creationist and an evolutionist?
Well, it's regardless.
That's right.
Any observation made by anyone, regardless of their background, they're observations. The battle isn't observations, it's the interpretation of those observations based on whatever history you accept.
Right.
Which again goes back to this question 15, why is this notion of faith in a particular history, which isn't observed, either creation or evolution, why is it being taught in science classes?
I mean, there isn't always even a disagreement, right? I mean, creationists and evolutionists both believe in natural selection. We can observe those processes. We understand it. It makes total sense. And even sometimes evolutionists are surprised. They find out, what, you believe in natural selection? Well, of course we do, because we thought of it first, actually. Edwin Blythe came up with a scientific paper. He was a Christian. He was a creationist. Came up with a paper about natural selection according to a biblical worldview. 20-some years before Darwin ever published Origin of Species.
One of the things we'd love is if evolutionists knew as much about creation as we know about evolution. As an organization, we subscribe to all the evolutionary publications out there. Many of the scientists on our staff who are now Christians and creationists were former atheistic evolutionists.
Right.
I mean, Dr. Carl Whelan, kind of the grandfather of the ministry here, he started off as an atheist, an evolutionist, and many other of our scientists have a similar story. I was an atheist. I came to a meeting to try to refute these guys.
So you take a look at the evidence and you can actually see that it supports the Bible.
That's right. Likewise, if you think of two different things that can be explained differently, common features, homology in living things. Living things look the same. And evolutionists say, some features of living, like the 5 digits that you see on many different mammals and so on. Evolutionists say, well, that proves evolution. That's one way of understanding it.
Because if I look at a bunch of different motor vehicles, even I get a unicycle and I get a tricycle and I get a little red wagon and I get a Porsche, they have similar features too.
But it had nothing to do with evolution.
Right, it's a common designer.
Right, there's the other explanation. It's either a common ancestor, evolution, or common designer. And if you look closely at many of these things, the common ancestor explanation doesn't really make a lot of sense. Common designer is a preferred scientific explanation for that. If you get into the genes and look at how things are going there.
Right. So Yeah, I guess there's an article on our website you can check out about that too, right? Creation.com/homology, which
That's right.
means talking about the similarities.
That's actually Chapter 6 of Refuting Evolution 2, one of our books. You can read the whole thing online. Chapter 6 deals with this issue of homology, living similarities in living things.
Now we got some other answers here. Here's answer number 2. Evolution has no doctrines, dogma, no rituals, traditions, or holidays. It has no leaders or defenders of the faith because it does not allow faith. Evolution is not a religion, and it's deceptive of creationists to claim that it is.
Okay, well...
Interesting how they're trying to institute Darwin Day here in Canada. I noticed that a little while ago.
There are many points that we can disagree with on that one. There's no leaders, there are rituals, there's traditions. We've just at length explained why evolution is a religion. It's a story about the past. There's no deception going on here.
Yeah.
And hopefully everyone can see that. It's a story about the past. You do your science in the present and you relate it to the past, like we've just explained.
Yeah. We're not being deceptive. You can go back and look through the videos we've done here. You can go online, you can check out the flyer, you can visit our website. There's no point in being deceptive, because sooner or later somebody's going to find you out, and of course the Bible says that we're not to be deceptive. Evolutionary philosopher of science Michael Roos said this: evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than mere science. Evolution is promulgated as an ideology, a secular religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. I'm an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian, but I must admit that in this one complaint, and Dr. Gish is but one of many to make it. Dr. Gish obviously was a creationist. The literalists are absolutely right. Evolution is a religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and it is true of evolution still today. Evolution, therefore, came into being as a kind of secular ideology, an explicit substitute for Christianity.
So is Roos also being deceptive?
Right.
He's calling evolution a religion. There's
and he's
evolutionists.
An atheist.
Yeah, evolutionists recognize evolution as a religion.
I went to an atheist meeting in Toronto one time. They had their atheist bus ad campaign. There's probably no God, so relax and enjoy your life. So there's this panel of folks, and I guess they wanted a fundamentalist Christian on the panel. So I got invited
that's
down.
you.
That was me, and I'm there, and this entire room filled with atheists. Right. So we had to talk about their bus ads, which I was like, I don't care what you want to spend your money on. Go ahead, but. Then there was Q&A time. Of course, every gun gets leveled at me. But that was great. I had a lot of good time, a lot of fun, good time there. But I actually met a humanist chaplain at that meeting. The man came up and he had this little pin on. It was like the humanist, the arm and leg, and celebrate our humanist. I think, and he was dressed up in kind of like this robe. And I was like talking to him. He's like, yeah, I'm a humanist chaplain. And so he would conduct services for humanism. So. Actually, they're talking about building a tower to evolution over in England.
That's right.
So they're going to have a monument to evolution.
Yeah.
Every layer is going to symbolize 1,000,000 years of Earth history and stuff like that. So people are making this a religious issue.
And it goes further than that. John Dunphy, he's an atheistic humanist, and he's quite open that they are to be proselytizers of a new faith. He says this. Preachers, yeah. They're to be out there evangelizing to get new converts. He says, I am convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as proselytizers of a new faith. The religion of humanity that recognizes and respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be the ministers of another sort, utilizing the classroom instead of the pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach, regardless of the educational level, preschool, daycare, or large state university. The classroom must and will become an arena of conflict between the old and the new, the rotting corpse of Christianity, together with all its adjacent evils and misery, and the new faith of humanism. It will undoubtedly be a long, arduous, painful struggle, replete with much sorrow and many tears, but humanism will emerge triumphant. It must, if the family of humankind is to survive. I mean, you can just picture him pounding on a podium in the front of
with Darwin's Origin of Species. You gotta believe it. You gotta believe
he's not
it.
a Bible thumper. He's an Origin of Species thumper.
That's right.
But
look what he's talking about here. Well, let's get organized. Let's get teachers, put them in the public school system. They're going to be preachers of a new faith. They're going to indoctrinate these kids in humanism. We're going to get rid of Christianity. It's a well-planned attack. They've been doing it for quite a long time now. He's speaking in the official journal of the American Humanist Association. So they've got a publication. He's obviously a leader. He's writing articles. I mean, we do the same things in our Creation magazine. You've written articles in Creation magazine. I have. What are we trying to do? We're trying to tell our supporters, hey, you can believe the Bible. You can actually support it.
Yeah.
They're doing the exact same.
You should base your life on it, and you should act a particular way,
That's right.
and so on and so forth. How is that any different than what's happening today with the evolution movement?
Exactly.
Yeah, let's teach people evolution, et cetera, et cetera.
So there are a couple of great articles with more details on this topic at creation.com. Atheism-a religion. Atheism, a religion. So creation.com/atheism is a different article that talks about the same things there. And you'll see some startling admissions. I mean, if you're
right.
an atheist out there and you say, oh, no, you haven't seen any of this stuff before, we have. We've been tracking this for a while, and we've got documentation here that can back up what we're saying. And you can see our atheism, agnosticism, and humanism section on our Q&A page at creation.com/religion. There are many articles to do with this topic.
Right, yeah. Now, on the other hand, biblical faith is never contrasted with reason or evidence. It's this, science is evolutionist science, creation is religion, and so on, faith.
Like the Bible never says, I have to have a blind faith.
Right.
The Bible actually says, come let us reason together.
There's statements like that throughout Scripture. Consider Thomas, often called Doubting Thomas. I mean, all the apostles should be called the Doubting Apostles because
he gets a bad rap.
The 10 apostles had seen the risen Christ. They'd seen the evidence for the resurrection. They saw the nail prints in the hands. It was him. He was risen. Thomas wasn't with them. Mm-hmm. And then they come up to Thomas and they say, well, Thomas, we've seen Jesus. He's alive. And he says, of course, I'm not going to believe it until you show me the evidence.
Yep.
Did Jesus deny him that? Of course not. He promptly showed him. He said, Thomas, come here.
Yep.
Look at my hands. Examine the evidence.
Right.
It's me. I'm alive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's example after example. And like you said, come let us reason together. And many other things where Christianity doesn't present a picture of this dichotomy between reason and logic and faith.
Science came to be when the Christian faith really started taking over the Western world countries.
That's
because
true.
in that concept, then you've got a God who upholds his creation by the word of his power. Right? And of course, you're going to expect uniformity. Tomorrow's going to be like today. Why? Not because the day before was like it was today, which would be circular reasoning. It's there because there is a God and he upholds his creation. And so if you do an experiment today, God's going to uphold his creation. Tomorrow it's going to be the same way. So those same two chemicals will interact in the same way and you'll produce the same result.
Right.
That's where science came from.
Because the Bible presents the characteristics of God. Well, it's his revelation to us. We wouldn't know anything about God. Let's just admit it.
Yep.
If he wouldn't reveal himself to us.
Right.
And that's what the Bible is.
And general revelation as well.
Yeah, the general revelation as well. The characteristics we have for God's character is that he is a God of order, not a God of chaos. If Zeus and his gang were in charge of the universe, why would the things that we measure and observe yesterday be the same today?
Right.
Depends on who's in charge upstairs, right?
The Greeks are looking at shark teeth in rocks saying, oh, wow, the gods are playing tricks on us because sharks don't live in rocks.
Yeah, God's not deceptive. He's not playing tricks on us.
The Christians are going, wait a sec, what's it say? Hey, look, there was a global flood. That might have buried a whole bunch of things and put fossils in the ground.
Hey, all right.
Right.
You know what, there's a great article on logic and reason and how that fits with Christianity. They fit together beautifully. Quite a lengthy, detailed article by Dr. Jonathan Sarfati. You can access that at creation.com/logic. Creation.com/logic. Fascinating article. Check that one out on creation.com there.
Yep. Now you can read all 15 questions for evolutionists online at creation.com/15-questions. You can check out all the videos. Tell your friends about them. Spread them around. If you're a skeptic, you can watch them. You can try to refute us. You can email in to us, and we'll probably get responses to you. We're not trying to. Sometimes people have written in, "Oh, you guys censor out information." Folks, go ahead, write it in. We'll see what we can do.
There's lots of stuff there, and for Christians, I mean, we've just got to conclude these 15 questions here and say, look, it's a great time to be a Christian. Evolutionists have written in, and we've dealt with that, and the website deals in more detail than we did on these 15 programs here. And we're trying to keep things a little short and not go too long with this stuff. So go to the website and check out some of the more detailed responses on the website. But from a Christian perspective, it's a good time to be a Christian.
Right. It wasn't like maybe 40, 50 years ago when all these questions were circulating. You didn't have answers. There wasn't support. You didn't have creation.com. There wasn't 35 years plus of creationist research to delve into on the website. 8,000 articles, DVDs, books, new discoveries all the time. Heavy-hitting scientists like Dr. John Sanford or Dr. Baumgartner, all these well-respected scientists in their own right in the secular field, and just producing information that absolutely supports the Scripture.
And from the evolutionist perspective, I mean, there have been answers, attempted answers that came in to each one of these 15 questions, and we've gone through them.
There's been no effective, not even one actually, point was rebutted.
Well, yeah, that's right. And some evolutionists have said, well, all 15 have been answered. Well, where? They haven't. The answers that have come in aren't sufficient to answer the question. And hopefully we've gone through that as honestly and patiently as we can. None of the 15 questions have been answered. These are massive problems for evolution.
So if you're basing your entire worldview on this concept of evolution, which is not supported by fact, even Richard Dawkins has said you can't, no one's observed evolution. If you're basing your whole future on that, I guess we can just conclude with this thought. You're going to be dead a lot longer than you were alive. And if the Bible's true and there is an afterlife, there are consequences for our actions and our beliefs in this lifetime. So we really need to, that's why we're doing these, of course, because we want people to know the truth, that God's Word can be trusted. And so you can understand life, you can understand the fact that you are a sinner, you've sinned against the holy God, and there's a judgment, a time when you will be judged. And when you die, you're going to stand in front of your Creator. There is a Creator. And you're going to stand in front of God, and you're either going to try to justify yourself and tell God why you're so good that you should be with Him in eternity, or you're going to have a representative in Jesus Christ, someone that has paid the penalty for your sin.
That's right.
But your sin will be paid for by either you or Christ's substitutionary act. So very
hopefully
important.
that will be seriously considered, because a lot of the responses that we've had to these questions are very emotional responses. No, you guys are wrong. You don't know anything about science, and this is all about science, and you don't know evolution, and so on. Not everyone. Now some of you who've sent in questions, you're honestly seeking, okay, what's going on here, and so on. And hopefully all of you watching this video would take a more calm and reasonable approach to seriously looking at these 15 questions, and not just giving emotional outbursts and, well, that's already been answered and so on.
Well, take a look and see if
they haven't been, okay?
Right.
And honestly deal with evolution. Does this story of the past did it actually happen? In our view, and the view of many millions of others today, and many scientists, the evolutionary view of history is wrong. It's unsupported, it's certainly unbiblical, and it can have disastrous consequences, because the correct view of history is that there is a God, and Cal, you already mentioned, there are consequences. If there's a God, and we live eternally, or a part of us lives eternally, and where we spend eternity is determined by what we do in this life before we die, those are serious questions that everyone needs to deal with, and we hope that every one of you will seriously consider those questions in addition to these 15 that we've just dealt with.